All right, and welcome to the Synchronicity Show. It is your host, Kevin Wathey, and my guest today is Dr. Ryan Monahan. Dr. Ryan Monahan completed his master's and doctoral degrees in Eastern Medicine at Emperor's College in Santa Monica, California, and completed his functional medicine training with both the Institute for Functional Medicine and the Kresser Institute for Functional and Evolutionary Medicine. Ryan, I am stoked to dive into this conversation today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate it.
It is entirely my pleasure, and I'm trying to decide on a jumping off point of where I want to dive in today, because there's a couple different avenues that I want to see where the conversation takes us. But as I said right before we hopped on, I'm very interested in kind of the why behind the who. So I want you to take us back to the beginning. And what did you initially want to be when you grew up?
Oh, wow. When I grew up, my mom tells me I wanted to be an architect, and that sounds good. So I'll stick with that. I don't think I was too preoccupied with that growing up. I think some people do know that right off the bat, and they kind of work towards that their whole life. But that wasn't really something I was thinking about. I think I was present to my experience at that time. I think I had different interests as I moved through different ages. When I was a kid, I guess I was interested in architecture. And then in my teens, I got really into music. So I wanted to do something in the world of music. College, I was an English literature and writing major. So I studied that just out of pure interest, not necessarily trying to have a career one way or the other. But then, I did need a job after. So I ended up working in advertising, and that was kind of fine. It wasn't like my life's purpose or calling. And eventually, thankfully, the universe intervened and forced me on a new path, whether I wanted it to go that way or not.
What did that intervening then look like? What kind of forced you into the path that you ultimately chose to take?
Sickness. I, in my mid-20s, had some health issues, lung issues, respiratory issues, and gastrointestinal digestive issues. And I was not getting better. I was going to my conventional Western doctor, and they would give me like antibiotics and proton pump inhibitors, acid blockers, and kind of send me on my way. And I was getting antibiotics like every 3 weeks or something, and it just get worse. So I couldn't live that way. I wasn't functioning very well. It was hard each day, just to exist. So I knew I couldn't keep living like that. And thankfully, some people in my life directed me to people they knew. One was an acupuncturist and one was a functional medicine doctor. And then between the two, I got a lot better really fast. Over the course of 6 months, things improved dramatically. And I was fascinated by how that was working and how they knew what to do, where conventional medicine doctors clearly did not in my case. And I had a lot of questions, and the more I asked, the more I felt like I didn't know what they were doing, So I was like, I wanted to read books, I wanted to take classes, I wanted to learn as much as I could. And then over the course of a couple of years of being that way, seeing these people regularly and just asking them questions, almost like an apprenticeship, I decided like, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I feel called to do. And I feel like the world needs this more than my advertising, marketing profile. So I wanted to be that person for other people in the future, the way those people were there for me when I really needed people to help. I wanted to be that for others in the future because I knew how much value there was in that. So I decided to make a career change, and there's a lot of fear around that. I was very, comfortable in what I was doing, and, I had a 401k and medical health insurance and all that stuff. So it was very safe, I suppose, to stay on that path. But it took me a bit to finally decide to jump ship. And once I did, I went back to school, and it was like 8 years of schooling. So it was a big investment in my life to make that shift. But I'm so happy I did. And the second I did, it started paying off.
Was being open to the, I don't want to, maybe spiritual side, or being open to the holistic or alternative side, something that you were always interested in or recognized growing up? Or was it something that when traditional or conventional medicine wasn't working is when you started to make that shift?
It's a really good question. And I did start with it at a young age, thanks to my mom, actually. I had allergies growing up. That I had to go to the doctor, the Western conventional doctor, and get allergy shots every Saturday as a young boy. And I don't know if people remember what it was like when you're a young kid to get a shot, but it's pretty terrifying. So every single week there was this dread and trauma that had to build up, like, oh my God, I have to go get a shot on Saturday. And I hated it. I just hated it. Everyone else was having fun, and I was going to the doctor every Saturday for a shot. And eventually my mom shifted and tried homeopathic medicine for me. And that was my first introduction to holistic alternative medicine, whatever you want to call it. And it was great. I mean, I don't remember the exact timeline because I was a kid, but I think it was like within a year, my allergies were resolved, and this is such a subtle medicine, homeopathy. You take these little white pellets and they dissolve onto your tongue, and that's it. It's like giving you kind of a small exposure to produce, and help your body build a defense against that thing, whatever it is you're allergic to. And that was my first introduction. And then as a teenager, I had depression. I suffered from depression, and I took Zoloft. I took antidepressants for a little stint. And my mom had heard a friend of hers that went to a guy who did shiatsu, which is energy work, working on the meridians that acupuncture works on as well. And I started seeing him, and that was my first introduction to my own energy, my own energetic body. And he tells me the first time he saw me that I had no chi, which is not good. You don't have to be very educated in Eastern medicine to know that's not a good thing to have no chi. So he started to cultivate my chi and to move it in my body. And I became aware. I was so disconnected, my mind to my body. And most people are, unless I've done some kind of energy work to connect that mind body energy. I was so disconnected, and he helped me awaken that. And so that kind of, and then I got into yoga, like really hard, like when I was 17. And then over the course of the next 5, 6, 7 years, I tried a lot of stuff, a lot of body work stuff and energy work. And then in my mid-20s is when I started to get sick, and that's kind of brought us up to speed.
I too had a similar experience with, it wasn't necessarily allergy shots, but I had to get the whole allergy panel testing on my back, where they take the 6-prong thing and they do like 32 different things. And apparently I didn't think it was a traumatic experience for me as a child at the point, but I vividly remember it. So maybe it had a bigger impact on me at the time than I thought it did. The interesting thing that you bring up is the disconnect between the body and the mind. And that's really the state that so many people live in. Like, there is no connection between the two. What happens up here and what happens down here, there is no interwovenness or whatever you want to call it for that. Was there a aha moment or a shift or a specific moment that you can remember where you're like, oh, wait, this connects to this, and now things feel more complete?
That's a good question too. I also had that terrible allergy prick test, by the way. They forgot about me. They left me too long. Like, they were supposed to be like 5 or 10 minutes. They left me for like 45 minutes. So that was a trauma as well. Laying on
your stomach, and you just have all these like welts and rashes across your back.
Terrible. Yeah, but to your point about when did I have that aha moment? If I did, it was definitely. Well, I mean, it was definitely initially during shiatsu, but then the thing that comes to mind is actually my very first semester in the school for Eastern medicine. We start with qigong, and that's to help you get in touch with the energy in your body on your own. Up until that point, my shiatsu practitioner had been kind of cultivating my energy for me in an external way. But then qigong helps you cultivate your own energy in an internal way. And I remember being in the park and, you go through the motions, you go through the forms. And then, literally within the first week or two of starting, it wasn't like I was some advanced Qigong master. You get to the point where your dantian, right below the navel, you can like feel with your hands, if you hold them 6, 8, 10 inches apart and kind of move back and forth, you can start to feel it's like a magnetic energy. It's like a magnetic force, and that's your energetic field. And then that was the first time I like felt my own energy. And it's like, oh, this thing everyone talks about energy, it's not this like woo-woo thing. It's a real thing. But if you tap into it, like you can feel it. You can feel your own energetic field. And anyone, who studies basic sciences knows that energy exists, right? And so we are energetic beings as well. And if you can start to tap into that and become aware of it, that's the beginning of like becoming awakened to yourself. And then from that point, it's like, how do you advance it? How do you cultivate it? How do you polish it and move it?
I want to kind of double click on the how do you advance it and how do you kind of cultivate it. But before we go there, an interesting thing that I heard this just recently, and it was someone talking about like energy and the world, and they were saying the position of the moon controls the tide, and your body is essentially 60-70% water. So why do you think that you are separate from the earth and the earth is separate from you when something as large as the ocean is controlled by elements outside of our control, and you think that you're greater than something, greater than the planet or greater than things outside of you? And I was like, wait a second, that's a fantastic analogy and way to like pull it together so that it actually makes sense between the two sides,
Absolutely. It speaks to, for lack of a better word, it speaks to our own egos, right? And how self-centered we are. And I don't mean that so negatively, but we are self-focused. Like we are in our own internal world all the time, always observing this projection around us. And I've heard that as well. And it's so true, right? Like, it's like people who are like, astrology is so stupid, it doesn't mean anything. I'm like, okay, I know there's like the bad horoscopes in the newspapers, but I'm not an expert on astrology, but I've dove into it a little bit. And how can you not acknowledge that massive planetary bodies in the universe pulling and shifting? How can you not acknowledge that those have some play in existence? I just think that's a lack of awareness to deny that other things beyond ourselves impact us.
I'd say probably a lack of awareness, and I know probably more about gardening than I do about astrology, and that's saying something. So go ahead.
I was just saying gardening is probably more directly applicable to your life. I mean, if you can garden, if you can grow your own food, I want to be buddies with you because I need some of that regenerative organic produce.
Exactly. The point I was making though was that to negate something as large or significant as that is really just an inability to see the big picture or to see what surrounds us in a way that not necessarily separates you from, but actually pulls you in together, and how everything then is interconnected, which, taking it back to what you said, is directly tied into your own ego, thinking that you're greater than something else.
And so that's the great thing about going through school for Eastern medicine. It deprograms you and then teaches you a new way to view the world. And in the first semester, again, you learn so much in your first semester, like the foundational class for Eastern medicine that you start with, the teacher would always tell us you have to empty your cup, because if you've reached that point, it's a graduate school program, you've been taught a certain way of thinking and a certain way of viewing the world. And this is a totally different way. It's 5,000 years old, if not more. It's based in Taoism, and it views everything through the lens of nature. Whereas Western, everything, philosophy, medicine, not so much. It's not really so nature focused. It's like man, and what we have done and manifest destiny. And we are in control of everything. We are more powerful than everything. And Taoism and Eastern medicine is kind of the opposites. We are part of nature. We're connected. We are not separate. And as soon as you can observe the patterns in nature, you'll be able to observe the patterns within yourself. And so goes nature, so goes humans. So that's a really different perspective. And when you start to deprogram your old mind, your old education, and kind of look at things through that new lens, everything looks different. And then you meet different people, because the people that you've had in your life, they're still on that other paradigm, that it's a different wavelength, and you just see things differently. You think differently. And that's why it can be really effective, where Western medicine is very important for, emergency medicine, acute care. It's the best. But, preventative medicine, holistic wellness, it's not really what that's built for. And that's why you can get such different results, like I did, when you go to somebody who's trained to see patterns and to see the big picture and the way everything's connected.
So take me back a second to double click on the cultivation of that energy. Once you began to recognize that it was real, it existed, and you saw that. What did that become with a fascination of, how can I learn more about this? How can I uncover more of something that I have been negligent to earlier in my life, or just not even been really aware of, is probably the best way to put it? Or what was that next step for you in the process?
Yeah. So that's the thing, is a lot of people want this kind of quick fix, right? We live in a culture of instant gratification, and people aren't really invested in anything longer than like 3 seconds. They can't pay attention. They can't focus. And I could go into that in a lot of different directions. But, so, Eastern medicine, functional medicine, I always say it's like a slow medicine, whereas we're used to Western medicine, that acute care, that emergency, being rushed into the hospital on a gurney and like plugging you into things and pumping you with drugs and these instant results. Like, that's important in that emergency situation. But in, holistic medicine, Eastern medicine, functional medicine, it's a lot slower. And so there's a lot of things you have to do, like when I work with patients, I'm like, it's not one thing. It's not like, take this one supplement and everything's better forever. It's a lifestyle medicine is really what it is. So, for me, it's an ongoing journey that will never end. And you have to enjoy the process. And my motivation in it is, I like to feel the best that I can all the time. I like to be my optimal self all the time. How can I? And then you don't even know who your optimal self is until you start to get on this path, because you've just been who you are your whole life, right? And then when you start to heal and start to make changes in your life to help support your physical body, your energetic body, then changes too. So it's a lot of stuff, to answer your question directly. It's no one thing. It's certainly starting with the basics: breathing good air, drinking good water, getting outside, moving your body, exposure to sunshine, eating the cleanest, best nutrient dense food you can. Like, these are table stakes that you have to start with. You can't brush all this off and be like, yeah, what's the real stuff? No, that's the real stuff. If you do all that for real, you'll get far. The cherry on the sundae is going to be, running labs and supplementing and, targeted supplementing and acupuncture and, lots of different lifestyle changes that you can implement, but you got to get the basics down first. And most people aren't. And it's not necessarily even their fault. Our world is not set up to make that easy at all. It's not, first you have to have education, and there's a lot of differing viewpoints on what it means. Like, what does it mean to be healthy, lead a healthy lifestyle? You could, have one person be on a carnivore diet and one person be on a vegan diet. Those are totally opposite diets. And there are people in both corners screaming that it's the best, So how do you make your way through that? How do you discern what is truly the best? And there's no right one diet for everybody. I do have my view on what's probably good for most people, but, you do have to start exploring, and you have to become really in touch and awakened to yourself and your body, and you have to listen to it, and you have to do things that make it feel good, and you have to stop doing the things that make it feel bad. Because most people come to me and they're like, okay, give me the things that make me feel better. I'm like, okay, let's actually start with taking out all the things that are contributing to the problem. Like people will message me sometimes, be like, should I eat carrots? I heard there's a lot of sugar in carrots. I'm like, you drink alcohol. Like, why don't you start by taking the alcohol out before you're worrying about the carrots? Like, people miss the forest for the trees sometimes, and you have to start with the basics, honestly. And most people in this world are not 100% on the basics. So that's where I think everyone should start.
It's interesting that you say that, and it's often in so many, not even just in nutrition, but in so many different areas of life, that it's what we say no to that moves the needle the most than what we actually say yes to, because you can only compound so many things on top of a negative, and then you're just amplifying a negative, so to speak. When in actuality, what you need to do is almost Eastern medicine and philosophically wise is break it down and get to the root cause of what is actually causing the problem, rather than Western, put a Band-Aid on top, negating an acute symptom, but in a way that makes sense to actually work from the inside out, so to speak.
Precisely. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly right. It's just two different ways of looking at things. Eastern functional medicine, it's all root based, like you just said. We're finding the root of the problem and trying to address that, or the roots of the problem. And so it's Eastern medicine, you get taught that it's a tree, right? There's a root system down below, and then what grows up out of that root system into the trunk of the tree is your body. And then like there's the branches, and the branches are all your symptoms, right? Like fatigue, headache, anxiety, weight gain, whatever it is. Those are all symptoms. What's causing them? What roots? And so we have to identify the roots, and that's not easy necessarily, but it's the most important thing to do. Because like you just said, Western medicine is going to treat the symptoms, and it's palliative and temporary, and often leads to new problems because you're not getting at that root issue.
So kind of bringing this full circle for a second, and something I'm interested in is we talked about the disconnect between brain to body, or body, mind, and soul, and kind of that connection together. What would be someone's first step who maybe isn't aware of where they're presently at because they lack that connection, but they're then looking to make a change, but they need awareness to make the change? So where would someone initially start in that specific situation?
It's a wonderful question too. It's, of course, the answer is it's going to vary by the person, but because we're not talking about anyone specific and we're just speaking generally, like the things that I said, first you have to clear the clutter, and the modern world clutters your body with so much toxic stuff, right? Obviously the physical things like food and drinks and medications and chemicals found everywhere. But then the, psychological stuff like media and social media and television and all that stuff that can clutter you spiritually, emotionally, physically. So starting to clear that out is, like you were saying, start saying no to these things. You have to identify them, and I think most people know, they just do it anyway, like it's no secret that like processed packaged food is not good for you, and sugar is not good for you, and alcohol is just inherently not good for you. I know everybody does it, but just because it's common doesn't mean it's a good thing. So just starting there, like for some people, honestly, for me, when I stopped drinking alcohol, that was a massive leap forward. And that's a place that a lot of people could start. And it sounds, I don't know, maybe it doesn't sound like a big deal to people, but it is. It's like a drug of our time, right? Like most people drink, and I quit drinking, I don't know, 24, something like that, 25. And my life changed. You have to be aware of all these changes that are going to come. Like when you say, okay, I'm not going to drink alcohol anymore. You stop doing certain things. You stop going to bars. You stop going to clubs, probably. You stop hanging out with people where your friendships were based on getting drunk or doing those things. And your body starts to heal a little bit, and you start to have more space and energy for other things. And then with that space and energy for other things, you seek those new things, right? And this is just one example, right? Alcohol. You could do this. You could do the same thing with sugar. You could do the same thing with toxic media, whether it's social or mainstream. You start to remove these things that are polluting you in one way or the other, and see what you suddenly have space for. You might suddenly go on more hikes, go to the beach, lay in the sun, go to the park. You might doing those things, you might meet more like-minded people, and then you meet these new friends and they introduce you to other new things. So I would say start clearing out the clutter and make space for new things is the place for most people to start.
I love that you bring up the two, not only alcohol, but sugar being the harder one for me to cut out of my diet almost completely.
Me too.
But there was a drastic change for myself when I used to drink pretty heavily back through college and after college. And there was a massive change where it was almost my priorities shifted. And then the priorities didn't then involve going out to clubs and drinking, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times a week, which in our society is almost glorified or praised. It's like, this is what you do. That's how you decompress from your day. But then you're actually almost stuck on the hamster wheel of this like cyclical thing that negative emotion, drink, more negative emotion, drink, more negative emotion, and it continues down. And I'm not saying for everyone it's that way, but I would say the vast majority of people don't actually recognize the implications of the drinking. It's almost because they are living in a place that this diminished or lowered state is their normal. They don't actually know what then that optimal level can feel like. And like you said, like until you experience it, until you experience the energy, you don't actually know what you're missing. You don't know what you don't know in that sense. And I like that you bring up alcohol and sugar, but are there any other things, I don't know, foods, anything else that maybe isn't forefront of mind, but is also something that the vast majority of people consume that is actually not necessarily something that's benefiting them towards their optimal self?
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of stuff. We could talk about a lot of things. I'll do like a quick list, right? So I tell most of my patients we start like, if you leave today and we do nothing else and you remove these things from your life, you're going to improve substantially. These are free things. You just have to stop doing them, take them out of your life, right? Alcohol and sugar, we already talked about. Caffeine, you and I touched on that before we started here. So like you were just saying, we use caffeine to get up and alcohol to get down, right? So alcohol is a depressant, caffeine's a stimulant. We use those things to function. We take these drugs to work, caffeine, right? And then we take alcohol to relax or let go or sleep, even though it makes your sleep way worse. So these are external drugs that we're using to affect our emotions. And in a sense, you're out of control then if you're using these drugs to create your reality with, right? Rather than something internal. So yeah, alcohol, sugar, caffeine. I come from a paleo perspective. So I do believe taking out grains is a good idea. Obviously processed packaged food, taking all of that out, because those are filled with food additives, preservatives, chemicals, all these things that are really messing up people's bodies, hormone endocrine disrupting substances and toxins. They're really, really detrimental. I don't think people realize how bad they are, especially in the accumulation. So that's going to be gluten as well. Gluten's like number one on my hit list for food. I think I run a gluten test on every single patient I have, no matter what. And I'd say 90% of them come back with, at minimum, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which if you look at the list of symptoms, it's pretty much everything people deal with, people that come to me for, at least. Everything. Google non-celiac gluten sensitivity symptoms. It's a long list. I've had patients, you take just gluten out of their diet, you make no other changes, and all their problems go away. Extreme anxiety, panic attacks, digestive issues, things like that. So Dairy, dairy is interesting because on paper, it has a lot of, healthy fat soluble vitamins, which a lot of people don't get enough of. But I would say many people don't tolerate dairy for one reason or another. And that might be because it's pasteurized, or we're, filling the cows or goats or sheep with antibiotics or hormones. Perhaps 100, 200 years ago, raw milk from these animals was a lot more beneficial. But most people, as a general rule, I say avoid dairy, unless really know you thrive off of it. And then in that case, try to get raw milk if you can. That stuff's pretty unadulterated. It's pretty pure. And then soy, right? So soy is like 90% GMO, if not more. I don't believe in eating genetically modified organisms. So I would say avoid soy. And that's probably my list, right? So gluten, grains, alcohol, sugar, dairy, soy. Oh, and then toxic vegetable oils. So there's a lot of these. I mean, probably the most common is like canola oil, corn oil, soybean oil, safflower, sunflower oil. All of those are industrial products. They are really processed, and there's hexane and all these awful chemicals that get used to make these things, bleach, all these things to deodorize it because it smells disgusting and looks disgusting. Those are incredibly inflammatory. So you could go to a restaurant and they could say on their menu, everything's organic, everything's grass fed, everything's wild caught. And then they're cooking it in canola oil or, soybean oil or corn oil or peanut oil. And they're just basically dousing it with inflammatory oils that then become inflammatory in your body. So yeah, taking out all that stuff I just listed, right? So you take all that out, truly 100% out of your diet, 6 weeks later, you're going to be feeling really good. And that costs you nothing. It's just making choices.
Yeah. If anything, you potentially, if you shop correctly, could save you money depending on how you spin it, and then could save you money if we factor in the health implications and then the medical costs that come with prolonged use of something. And I in no way have the perfect diet in any sense of the word, and I want to talk a little bit more about what your diet and what your kind of, it's not really a diet, more of like your lifestyle and how you approach nutrition. But before we do, I want to touch on caffeine, because that's something that fascinates me. I love coffee. I'm probably more addicted than I should be to these Celsius energy drinks. And I want to dive into that. So explain caffeine to me and its effects on the body that most people don't necessarily understand or recognize of what it's actually doing to them.
Yeah, caffeine, it's a drug. It's a psychoactive drug that everyone in the world consumes. And we're all on this big trip together of the caffeine experience, right? And it's it has a history that is pretty spiritual in a sense, using substances that contain caffeine in kind of a spiritual way, which is very different than what we do now. We abuse it as a drug, right, to function and to be productive, because Western culture is all about that production. And it's really like, the history of the coffee break is interesting. It was basically introduced just to get more out of the workers, right? Like at your job, having that coffee break, it seems like, oh, they're doing you this favor. No, it's just to get you to work harder and longer and more efficiently, right? Same as cigarette breaks, nicotine, right? So it's all about getting more out of the workers, really. So caffeine, I always tell my patients, if we took it out of your life 100% for, like 6 weeks, what would happen? What would your life look like? Would you crumble? Would you fall apart? Are you that person in the morning who's like, don't talk to me until I've had my coffee? If you're that person, you're addicted to coffee or caffeine, really. Lots of things have caffeine, like the Celsius drink, apparently. I'm not even familiar with it, but so caffeine is a drug that is addictive. And if you have the relationship where we took it out of your life and you didn't miss a beat, you probably have a healthy relationship with it. I have maybe, 6 cups of coffee a year, something like that. And it's like a drug experience for me. And I love it. It's like, this is so cool. I'll be somewhere special, usually traveling somewhere. and I'll find a place. If they have like amazing coffee, like I'll get a coffee and I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is such a cool experience. It's a total drug when you don't have it in your life. And then you take it in with that intention, right? Yeah. So if you have that relationship where you can come and go from it, I think it's probably okay. And your body's processing it well. If you have the relationship with it where your life depends on it, it's time to explore that relationship and why you're using it to prop your life up so much, and how can you make space and changes in your own life to not require this drug that is taxing your system. A lot of people think like, oh, I'm just running on caffeine. No, the caffeine is stimulating certain chemical hormonal reactions in your body that are tapping into, in Eastern medicine, what we call your jing, which is your life force. So it's draining your life force. It's aging you faster, and it's taking away from other energetic processes in the body. So your body might have like a certain amount of energy for your kidney, a certain amount of energy for your heart, for your lung, for your spleen, for your liver, for your digestion. And then when you do something, and not only caffeine, but when you do something like caffeine, it pulls from all those things. So those things suddenly aren't functioning quite as well as they could. And you're kind of stealing it, you're stealing that energy. So if you're really dependent on caffeine, that's a great place to start. And, there are certain things that make it specific, right? So like there's the COMT gene, there's the CYP1A2 gene. Those both have to do with caffeine metabolism and how well you're able to metabolize it. So if you can metabolize it really well, you're probably one of those people who has a pretty decent relationship with it. You can burn through it, and you can sleep well, and it doesn't really affect you quite as much. But if you're somebody who you do have those genetic SNPs, and they're kind of making you predisposed to not really deal with caffeine quite as well, it's having a worse effect on your body. Aside from the physical component, there's a spiritual component, right? So are you asking too much of yourself? And if so, why? And where can you make space and move into a parasympathetic existence, rest and digest? You can't really do that if you're drinking coffee every day. You're forcing your body to stay in sympathetic fight and flight stress mode. It's a stress response is what caffeine's stimulating, your adrenals. So that's my answer for caffeine. Play with it. See where you're at. Take it out of your life. This is the only way to really know what's you have to start making changes to see changes. And that's a great place to start.
I absolutely love that quote. You need to start making changes to see changes. That's fantastic. Yeah, I've never been the don't speak to me in the morning until I get my coffee kind of person. Like I'm up at 4:35 at the gym, and then probably like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock rolls around, I'll have a cup of coffee. And then now it's this afternoon Celsius drink that I'll have, which is, quote, the healthy version, but we all know that's not the case for really anything. So you talked about what to remove from your diet. I want to talk about what to add to it, or what yours specifically looks like. So if you could walk me through kind of a day in the life, so to speak.
Yeah, totally. It's really boring. That's the thing. Is a lot of people food has become entertainment. Food is a drug as well. And a lot of people want to dazzle their flavor profiles as much as they can. And we've been brainwashed by the food industry that uses, scientists, like food chemical scientists, to elicit these magnificent roller coaster rides, these flavor experiences that we then become addicted to. And when you use these artificial chemicals to manipulate the minds and mouths of the people, broccoli doesn't sound so good, like celery isn't just this experience, but if you can start to, like I was talking about before, clear out the clutter, right? And bring your palate back to this natural profile that's existed for millions of years prior to the invention of all these food chemicals in the last century, you'll start to really appreciate the flavor profile of vegetables. I eat a lot of vegetables every day, and I love them because I've gotten to the point where I can appreciate the flavor. I buy, organic, regeneratively produced produce as much as I can. And so that has more nutrients and it has more flavor, more phytochemicals. A lot of people, like tomatoes is a perfect example. Like most tomatoes in America that you buy at like, kind of a not great grocery store, it's like watery and flavorless and like, of course, why are people going to want to eat vegetables when they taste like nothing? It's a sad fact that research has shown the nutrient content of produce is not what it was 50 years ago. You'd have to eat like something like 10 oranges to get the same amount of vitamin A actually as one orange today. So that's just one example. But in general, like they've lost all their nutrient value, their phytochemicals. And those are the things that send chemical messages through our body and help support us in a healthy way. So, you have to clear out all the bad stuff. You got to buy really high quality stuff and that has nutrients in it. So you want it. So your body's like, ooh, that tastes good because it's telling you it's doing good things for you with those flavors, right? So in a day so like I said earlier, I'm a paleo perspective as a general category, just to give it a name. But for me personally, I eat meat, fish, and vegetables. Basically that. I eat almost no fruit. Maybe 1 or 2 or 3 pieces per season. If it's like local in season and it's just like a beautiful piece of fruit and wow, that looks great. But like, 1 or 2 or 3 pieces every 3 months, maybe of fruit. Nuts and seeds. That's kind of my filler. It's almost my dessert, at the end of a meal. So I'll have some nuts and seeds, healthy fats and oils and satiates you, fills you up. So, I also drink for breakfast this kind of functional medicine, medical food drink, right? So it's like powders and water. I blend it and I drink that in the morning. And then lunch, again, it's like, usually these days it's like wild salmon, green beans, carrots, I don't know, whatever the vegetables are, cabbage, whatever is fresh and in season and local and good. And then dinner, I eat a steak like every night. and then tons of vegetables like Brussels sprouts, carrots, asparagus, kale, cabbage, whatever is good. Whatever is local and in season. You got to eat with the seasons, right? So like eating pineapple in February in Nebraska is not like what nature intended. So everything I do is through the filter of what is in line with nature, what's local to me, what's in season right now. And that's what I eat. I eat a lot of the same thing every day. I mean, in the categories, right? Meat, fish, vegetables. That's like all I eat every day. And I have come to love it because it makes me feel good. It's not like the sensation of going to like a new restaurant and trying all the crazy things that they have going on. And that's not to say you can't use herbs and spices for huge flavor profiles, because herbs and spices are some of the most nutrient dense substances on earth. And you should use as many as you can. Yeah.
That was going to be my follow-up to that, was what are the most nutrient-dense foods, or the ones that you search out the most? Or does it really then vary per season?
Yeah, the most nutrient-dense food on the planet is beef liver. I mean, statistically speaking, if you look at the nutrients, the vital nutrients, the essential nutrients that are in that substance, it's you talk about superfoods, it's not, I don't know, what a acai or something. It's beef liver, but that's not fun. That's not like a fruit that is tasty and sugary. Beef liver is intense. I have to really intentionally consume it, but it's like a multivitamin. It has the highest levels of, vitamin A, B12, copper, vitamin D, like all these things, other B vitamins, other minerals, all these great things. So if you can have that from time to time, you're really doing yourself a huge service. So any organ meat is going to have the most nutrients, especially beef liver. But then right behind that are things like shellfish. So like oysters, clams, mussels, those are super rich in all sorts of essential nutrients that most people don't get. And then animal proteins, vegetables, herbs and spices. Cacao has actually got a lot going on. fruits, right? So there's benefits to them, but I just don't put them on the list for nutrient dense substances, mainly because they have sugar in quantities that is higher than vegetables. And there's nothing you can't get in fruit that you can't get from vegetables, minus a lot of the sugar. So I'm not somebody who thinks you should have a ton of fruit. And this is coming from somebody who used to eat a massive bowl of fruit for breakfast every day, but that messed me up, long term, that messed me up. So those are my nutrient dense foods. Really, organ meat to start with, beef liver number one with a bullet, shellfish, vegetables, herbs and spices, cacao, other animal proteins.
Where does one get organ meat? Where would where would you be looking for that as something that's nutrient dense that isn't seen traditionally on the shelves?
So that's a great question too. I live in a bubble that I forget about sometimes because I'm in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of health focused people here in a lot of places that you can just go get these things really easy. Like there's a place called Bel Campo down the street that I buy my beef liver. It's $1 a piece. So, you talk about earlier people, well, we didn't go into it. I wanted to a little more, actually, the way people prioritize their budgets, right? Like they say they can't afford to buy organic produce, but then they go, I don't know, and spend all their money on these things that aren't good for them. So it's kind of, where do you want to prioritize your money at the end of the day? For most people, I don't want to speak to everybody, but some people are buying things they don't need when they could be buying things that are really benefiting them. But the most nutrient dense food on the planet, beef liver, at the best place in Los Angeles, is $1. So if you're not prioritizing that, you're just choosing not to, right? You're just choosing not to spend that $1 on that because maybe it sounds weird, or you don't know, or it tastes bad, which is all true. It sounds weird and it doesn't taste great, but it's so good for you. So you can order this online to answer you. You can order. So, I give my patients these handouts and, links to different websites where you can order, like even Bel Campo, the one I just listed, you can order that beef liver on belcampo.com and it'll ship to you. And there you go. But if you don't want to order online, go to your farmer market, make friends with somebody selling animal protein, ask them if they do liver, a butcher, go to a butcher and ask them if they do liver. Go to your grocery store and ask the butcher there, do you guys do liver? Most of the time they do, or they can, if you request it. And it's so cheap, and it's the most nutrient dense food you can find.
That's interesting that you say that. And I never thought to okay, let's go search this out. And it's probably, it's cheaper then because no one is actively looking for it. And when things, no one's actively looking for it. So then it's cheaper than what would be the alternative and healthier for you in the grand scheme of things as well. And to piggyback kind of there, I like that you speak about priorities, because in every element of life, that's really what it comes down to is, I don't have the priority, or you say, I don't have the money to do this, but you have the latest iPhone. So then that becomes the priority. Or I don't have time to do this, but you're out partying on the weekend. So that then becomes your priority. And everything that you then do in life is actually broken down into levels, how you prioritize, or the prioritization levels of your life. How important is your health to you, and is it a priority? If it's not, you're going to find excuses, or you're going to negotiate with yourself to find a way out. Always, in any aspect of anything. And this, I'm going to pull this back in to the follow-up here, because I'm interested in prioritization now. And people who do prioritize their health, specifically people kind of, and you see this a lot I've seen it in Los Angeles, even out here in Scottsdale, that people who prioritize their health then turn from starting at the source, the nutrient-dense foods, and then going into supplements. And there are a lot of positive and a lot of negative supplements that people don't recognize. So what are fake supplements? And what are certain supplements that people should be taking every day?
Love the topic. Yes, supplements. I take a lot every day. There's some people in the wellness world that will be like, you don't need supplements if you eat the right diet. I don't know. If, like we talked about earlier, if you're measuring the nutrients in food right now versus 50 years ago, in a lot of cases, it's 1/10 the amount, right? So the world is getting harder to live in. And supplements are pretty important. I take a lot every day, and I see a lot of benefit in myself and in my patients. And but you have to find the right ones. Targeted supplementation, right? Not just doing what somebody else is doing because they said it worked for them. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. They might have needed that thing they're taking, and you might not need it at all. You might need something totally different. But then to touch on what you mentioned, fake supplements. Okay, so this is a big deal, and I try to tell people this. It's all about sourcing, with anything in life, you got to get the good version of it, right? There's a lot of bad knockoff versions or fake versions or not so great versions. So with fake supplements, they actually have done independent third-party testing on popular supplement brands from places like Target, GNC, Walmart, CVS, common places that most people buy, Amazon as well. Most people buy their supplements, and they found 80% of these supplements were not what they said they were. They either did not contain the same amount of what that substance was in it. It was like, watered down amount, or in many cases, it didn't contain it at all. And it actually contained fillers, things like, corn, rice, house plants, it's wild what they found in these supplements. So people are buying these things thinking they're doing themselves a service, and they're not at all. They're totally wasting their money. That gives supplements in some way a bad name because people are like, oh, it didn't work. Like, okay, but what did you take? You got to take the right stuff. You got to work with a professional who knows what the right stuff is, who can prescribe it to you. A lot of the supplements I give my patients are prescription only, and you should test. I test all my patients for all their micronutrient levels. So you're seeing this person's great. They're replete in, vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin B6, magnesium, like they're good on those, but they are really deficient in vitamin D, vitamin B12, zinc, and copper. And, then you give them those. You give really, really high quality physician grade supplements in the right dosing for those people. And you can even figure out from blood work exactly how much they need, how often they need. So that's using supplements therapeutically, intentionally targeted, right? Not just like swinging by CVS and picking up a vitamin C gummy and being like, oh yeah, I take supplements, it's been found that most supplements are empty, fake, like you said. So if you want to get serious and really get serious results, work with somebody who knows what they're doing, So, functional medicine, we don't, or at least I don't use pharmaceutical drugs. I use high grade physician grade supplements instead.
Do you see at all a placebo effect with people who start taking supplements and then come to you?
I love the topic of the placebo effect. So inherently, we are kind of conditioned growing up to be like placebo effect equals bad, equals manipulation, equals being lied to, like placebo effect is great. If you can give somebody let's look at a drug trial. Okay. So they give, half the group the drug that is supposed to fix the thing, and then give the other half the placebo. There have been studies that found, in certain instances, the placebo group benefited more than the drug group, right? And that's with no side effects. You're not giving them a drug that their liver has to process and long-term can cause new side effects. So if you can figure out a way to give somebody something that doesn't have any effect other than improves the thing you're trying to fix, that's amazing. That's better than a drug. Your body doesn't have to process that thing, So if I could just like touch you on between the eyes, right, your yin tong third eye, and be like, you are healed now, and you truly believed it, and you were healed, that's the best healing possible. So, placebo effect. I think belief matters. I think you have to believe that. Something is going to work for it to work to an extent, right? And visualization is a very powerful tool. Belief is a very powerful tool. And, it starts to infringe on the concept of faith, right? And being connected and tuning into yourself. And I think people are more powerful than they know. And your body is built to heal itself on its own. We aren't dependent on these external things, supplements, drugs. You don't have to have those things to heal. Your body knows how to heal itself. You have to put itself in the position to heal. And we are every day confronted with 100 things that knock us out of alignment and put us out of position to heal. So you have to identify those things. You have to set boundaries against them and avoid them and do all the things that do put you in a position to heal. It's a full-time job, right? It's not just you go to the spa for the day or you do a retreat for a week. It's like it's kind of a full-time thing in this world that we're in right now.
It brings the conversation almost back full circle to this moment, because it's the things then that you say no to that are actually the ones that put your body into a position to then heal itself. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to allow it to keep turning on its own, so to speak.
Yeah, taking those blockages out. I mean, that gets back to acupuncture. When you're working on energetic pathways in the body, people are like, "What does acupuncture do?" We're removing blockages, stagnant energy, blocked energy, so your body can heal itself. You're getting yourself out of your own way, I suppose. And you have to do that at every level of your life. And you are right. It does come back full circle in the sense that, so what are you saying no to? And that's the hardest thing. Most people just want to add. They want to okay, what do I take for this? What do I do for this? And well, start removing, start clearing, stop doing things actually that cause, that's preventative medicine, right? Stop doing the things that are causing the problem. There's this quote, I don't know if I'll be able to remember it, but something like, before you heal somebody, ask them if they're willing to let go of the things that are causing them to be sick in the first place.
I like that. Because it's, what do I take for this thing? Well, actually, what do you need to stop doing to remove it? It's not what you put on top of it. It's what you stop doing that then prevents it from actually happening.
Yeah. I mean, Western society, right? It's that quick fix mindset. And what do I do so I can just keep doing all the things I already do? Give me the thing that lets me not change anything about my life, because change is hard. It pays off, but it is hard for many people. And it's not always people's fault. It's not just a matter of willpower. I mean, people are chemically addicted to things, and that people go through withdrawal periods. I talk to my patients about even things like gluten and dairy, gluteomorphin and dairy, caseomorphin. If you can hear the end of the word, it's like morphine, right? So these are, when you eat grains with gluten and you eat dairy, it actually, and rice as well does the same thing. Your liver converts it to a morphine-like substance that attaches to opioid receptors in your brain, making you addicted as if you're on opioid drugs, right? So when you take those things out of your diet, you're going through an opioid withdrawal in a sense, and it can take 3-4 weeks, maybe longer, to get past that. And in that period of time, it's not fun. If familiar with the withdrawal symptoms at all, it's not a pleasant experience. And that's why people, like you were talking about earlier, people make excuses for so many things, oh, well, I can't do it right now because I'm going to Italy and I definitely want to eat pasta and drink wine while I'm there. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, well, that's me, I suppose. But yeah, to an extent, you do have to get out of your own way and stop making excuses if you want to make some changes that will get you somewhere.
To quote you here, you need to make changes to then see the changes, which I love that. I'm gonna keep that. Ryan, this has been an absolute pleasure and super educational, informative for me, and not just me. I guarantee the listeners as well. I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you to kind of bookend the episode, so to speak here. The first one being, in terms of your own personal development, who or what has had the biggest impact on you?
Oh man. This sounds self-centered, but my own body, honestly, my own body demanding relentlessly for me to heal it no matter what. I've had to sacrifice a lot of things in my life, and I'm not playing a victim. I'm just saying, I've had to end relationships. I've had to move. I've had to stop working at jobs. I've had to stop doing things I thought I enjoyed doing. My body has just forced me to heal. And so, I guess my body, but other than myself, my body, all the practitioners I've worked with, acupuncturists, functional medicine doctors, energy workers, body workers, all those people have been really instrumental in my path.
If you could have a conversation with someone living or not, who would it be and why?
Kurt Cobain. I love Kurt Cobain. I live 5 doors down from where he lived right now, when he wrote, like In Utero and Nevermind, and like was married to Courtney Love and had a baby, and like the biggest year of his life, 91, 92, he lived 5 doors down from me. And I didn't know that until after living here for 8 years. And I've been obsessed with him my whole life. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I just love Kurt Cobain. I would love to have a conversation with him.
If you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Oh, don't drink soda. Don't eat crappy food, and don't drink crappy stuff, because it's going to make you sick and it's going to cause a lot of problems.
Last but not least, in your opinion, what is the single most important thing someone can do to live a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life?
That's a big one. Oh, man. You have to identify who you are and why you're here. What's your purpose? And like truly, not just what society wants you to be, or your parents or your friends think you should be, or your partner wants you to be. Like, what's your purpose really deeply, deeply inside? If you can identify that and then start working toward it, you're going to be happy a lot of the time. And if the biggest compounder for health is stress, right? And that comes in many forms. It's not just being stuck in traffic or being in a fight with your boss or something. It's a lot of like existential, almost like, why am I here? If you can identify your purpose, and that takes a lot of work, and many people don't. I would say most people honestly probably don't in their life. But if you can identify your purpose, you will be very fulfilled and happy and healthy probably for your whole life.
I love that. Ryan, thank you again for your time today. Sincerely, this has been a fantastic conversation. And anyone listening, if you are looking for your purpose, I would say to piggyback off this conversation is to continually make changes so that you can see the changes and uncover what it is that you're looking for. And I think that might be the biggest lesson that I took away from this today too. So Ryan, thank you again. I want to open the floor to you before we wrap up here. Is there anything else you'd like to say, add? Where's the best place for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah. So I post a lot on Instagram. You can follow me there and check out what I've posted. A lot of things I talked about and more. I try to give as much information away for free as I can, because functional medicine and Eastern medicine aren't really big insurance things, and they can get expensive. So I try to just give away as much as I can and help as many in that way. So Instagram is dr.ryan.monahan, Dr. Ryan Monahan. And then you can email me too. If you have questions, like people can email me. It's drryanmonahan@gmail.com, drryanmonahan@gmail.com. Oh, and then my website is peacefulmountainmedicine.com, and everything's there. If you just go to the website, you can get to everything. peacefulmountainmedicine.com.
Beautiful. I will link to all of the above and more from the episode at kevinwathey.com/podcast. And Mr. Ryan, Dr. Ryan, thank you, my man. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I loved it. This was a great conversation.
Hey, it's Kevin here. And before I let you go, I wanted to let you know that the complete show notes for this episode, as well as any other, can be found at kevinwathey.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a short review on Apple Podcasts. I love reading the reviews, and they're often the tipping point in helping us book some very hard to reach guests. Now, if you want to or would like to receive a weekly email from me called the Weekly Mindful Memo, head over to kevinwathey.com/VIP to subscribe. By signing up, you'll receive exclusive behind-the-scenes access and be the first to know about upcoming episodes, retreats, and more direct to your inbox. Again, you can sign up to receive the Weekly Mindful Memo by going to kevinwathey.com/VIP. Thank you for listening. Much love, and have a wonderful rest of your day.